16th century Spanish mystic Teresa of Avila saw the mystery of the divine indwelling as available to everyone, but she was able to blend her mystical inner life with practical skills required for everyday living and creating. In her book Meditations with Teresa of Avila, author Megan Dawn looks at the wisdom of the Christian mystical tradition with the intention of making it accessible to everyone, regardless of religious or spiritual affiliation. This is Megan Dawn on Chief for Yourself.
Talking about our concept of saints and sages and mystics such as Teresa of Avila is often one of constant piety and contemplation. Tell us a little bit, though, about Teresa the person and how her story is relevant today.
Yes, well, Teresa, I think, is a great example for us today, principally because she was a woman of great practicality, of immense intelligence, very independent and stubborn, and so she had to utilize these things to help her journey, which she did very well. She had very good administrative skills and fundraising skills and very good diplomacy skills. So she carved out a beautiful pathway of really bringing the contemplative and the active together. So, yeah, we do hear a lot about her very mystical experiences, but that was only a part of her being, and the other part, which what I think the most beautiful thing is that she fused them together so that they were inseparable. And I think that this is the most important point. You know, I always say that you know, she was dealing with tax laws one minute and having an incredible mystical experience, and all within the same half hour, you know. And so I think for us it's like, you know, this is not an either-or situation, that we are also called, I think, very much today to be very much, you know, in the world, but not of it, and being able to bring our spirituality into a living reality.
Your book contains meditations that are grouped into what are called 7 dwellings. Talk about how you structured the book.
Well, it's based on Teresa's major work, The Interior Castle. So she spoke about the 7 dwellings, which is really taking us deeper and deeper into our inner soul. So we're starting on the outer rim of the castle, if you like. She spoke about the soul as a beautiful, luminous crystal castle. And then as we make our way into these dwellings, they teach us different things about ourselves, about the spiritual path, you know, for instance, of self-knowledge. She said it's important that we visit all the dwellings. So we may be called into the dwelling and the room of sadness. We may be called into the room of courage. We may be called into the room of, you know, deep spiritual experience. And she speaks about the fact that we're not to stay in any one room for any length of time. That we are to experience everything in this life, both on a human level and a spiritual level.
Teresa talked about God living within her during a time when people thought of God as being out there or up there. This sounds like heresy, and even though Teresa was somewhat of a free spirit, was she ever fearful for her life?
Absolutely she was, because her writings were actually sent to the Inquisition, you know, principally for this very notion. And also she did have some rather harsh words to say about some of the priests of the day. So she wasn't seen in good light by, shall we say, the staunch observers of the church of the time. However, you know, true to her form, because she came from a background of nobility, and she maintained her connections and contacts, and in fact, she knew the king. You know, so she wrote him a letter and said basically, hey, you know, I'm in trouble. I need help. And so he, you know, rallied to her cause and pretty much got her off any further Inquisition inquiries. So, and I think she tempered some of her, you know, writings a little bit there, to try to cover up sometimes, but she was pretty bold, I think.
Hmm. Teresa followed the voice of what she called her beloved, probably another dangerous practice in those times. Why wouldn't she just take the safer route and refer to the voice as God?
Well, I think she did at times, though, she had a very personal relationship. So I think she couldn't deny this. And, this very typical mystical relationship, which we hear about, within the Sufis particularly as well. And I think really she became, so surrendered and absorbed in this love that her fear began to cease. So she did go through incredible fear and self-doubt. But I think the more she walked on the path, and the more she realized she was being truly supported by the divine beloved, that she really didn't have anything to fear from these, mortal men, so to speak. So I think that really was, it's a spiritual maturity that we're witnessing.
Also in the book, you tell of Teresa's experience of purification. Talk about purification and how it's an important stop on anyone's spiritual path.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I have to say this, that I was very happy when I finished writing the chapter on purification. As she says, even just because you're following this pathway doesn't mean it's going to be necessarily an easy one. There are times when we, literally walk through the divine fire, where we really do come, I think, deeply face to face with our old fears and doubts, and also very much our societal patterns, our family patterns, any prejudices, any biases that we might hold ours or our families or our generations, of ancestors before us. So we also, come directly into contact with the ego again and again, and our ego pride and wanting to put ourselves first. And she speaks a lot about, our reputation and how we can use, discretion as a way of trying to, hold on to our reputation in the eyes of our society, making excuses of why we should keep quiet about certain things, in order to keep the peace. And so she, you've really come up against, I think, the subtlety of the ego in the purification. And that's what she says, we have many, many voices, and the ego is very subtle and tricky, and in fact gets more subtle as we walk the path. And really we must be willing to totally surrender this in order to truly step into that union of being that she came to know. Even though quite late in life she did come to know it.
Mm-hmm. When we see that a lot of what Teresa was about and what mysticism in general is about flies in the face of traditional Catholic Church teachings, with the intensified interest in mysticism today, is the Catholic Church in some trouble?
I think it has been for a little while. It's an old institution. It needs to break down in order to be raised back up in a totally new way. And I think that really gives this the idea of the mystic is that you can truly, experience the divine within. And you really don't need, somebody on the outside trying to administer the way for you necessarily. I mean, we can all certainly learn from one another, but I think that that's very different. There's, the mystic is not so involved with hierarchy. It's more in the sense of a circular, that you hold a particular wisdom that maybe I haven't experienced yet, and I hold a wisdom that you haven't experienced. So let's share that and open and activate each other. So I think it's a very different way of looking at things. And, I mean, I certainly think the Catholic Church really needs to open its doors again to the, to the feminine aspect in its priesthood as well. I mean, that's, so far outdated, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, I really do think that it is in trouble, yes.
Our guest on this Chief for Yourself is Megan Dawn, author of Meditations with Teresa of Avila, A Journey into the Sacred. Teresa believed that the divine voice could be heard during our meditations. And getting back to what you said about the ego, how do we know that we're not hearing the voice of the ego rather than the voice of the beloved?
Right. Well, she actually says, she responds to this, and she said, the more time that you spend within, the more discernment that you're going to have about this. And she said, in the meantime, I'll give you some guidelines. So she basically says, if you're experiencing any kind of conflict in your being, then that's the ego kind of pulling at you. So you can disregard that. If the voice is kind of making you feeling a little bit superior or a little bit inferior, then that's the voice of the ego, because the realm of spirit does not operate in superior and inferior. She speaks the other way too, if something comes as a complete surprise, like something that you wouldn't even think about or wouldn't even consider that you would do, she said, then take note of that, because very often that's the spirit, because it's something we haven't clearly been hatching or planning. She also speaks about if it brings you into a place of very gentle peace, well, then that, too, you should listen to, because that can, very often be the Spirit speaking to us. And certainly, she said that the acid test really is it making you more loving and compassionate towards your fellow human beings? If it is, then that is the voice of the beloved.
Yeah. Teresa had plenty of what some might call secular interests. She felt we can still maintain a bond with the divine, even while our thoughts are on day-to-day activities. And that seems to run counter to many beliefs about spiritual practice. How can we incorporate the two areas into our lives?
Well, it is. It is, I think, a wonderful thing that she brings out, because I think this provides a lot of consternation for people on their spiritual pathways that, unless they're completely absorbed every moment, then they're sort of thinking they're off the path. And she's saying, no, we can, and in fact, always have access to this deeper divine within. And once one is walking on the path for a while, you get to feel it there all the time, this sort of steady presence. And even if you're busy dealing with details or doing your shopping or, your laundry, that this deeper presence is always there. And I think that a matter for us is to really start to come into awareness of that, and start to see these two areas of our being actually being able to coexist, and where there's not a dichotomy between them anymore. I think we've been very much an either-or people, and I think that we're really coming into a place of either and, it can be both occurring here. And I think that this is becoming incredibly invaluable for our modern world, because we are all so busy and we are also, doing so many different things. And yet if we can bring in that deeper presence that we may be more aware of, I would like to say, in meditation times or in times of when we're in the natural world or in places of where our heart is deeply touched. So I think this is a really important lesson, and I think that it's pretty incredible that she was touching on that and bringing that forward, back in the 16th century.
Mystics in general have a great appreciation for nature and the environment, and with a succession of tornadoes and earthquakes and tsunamis and droughts and things we're seeing every day in the world, how might Teresa of Avila have made sense of it all?
Well, I personally feel like her message would be that, one of my favorite quotes of hers is, there is nothing outside of your being that can give you peace or security. So I think that she might see it in the sense of like, it doesn't matter so much what is happening on the outer side of your world. And she even speaks about it actually doesn't even matter what's happening on the inner, even if you're experiencing inner tsunamis and inner earthquakes, so to speak, that again, that deeper peace is there. So I think that she would merely say, this is a time for us really to remain steadfast. That this is the time actually we've all been kind of training for, so to speak, because it's very easy to remain in a peaceful state of mind and a stability when everything around you is calm. But the true, I think, spiritual test is, can you maintain your equilibrium and your spiritual steadfastness when everything is in chaos? So, and she experienced much chaos, both inner and outer, in her world. So I think that she would take it in her stride and just go, okay, let's just keep going here and do what we do.
So there's that inner place where really nothing can get to you and nothing should be able to hurt you.
That's right.
Yeah.
How has writing the book affected you in your own journey?
Somewhat tremendously. I mean, it was one of those surprises. I mean, I never had any inclination or aspiration to write a book whatsoever. So it was really a divine surprise, and I feel like a tremendous gift, because I really feel like it was just given to me and laid before me step by step. And of course, it was not just a theoretical exercise. This was a very practical involvement of being asked to live every word, and it's ongoing. I'm being asked to live every word every day, and sometimes it's this dwelling in this chapter, and sometimes it's that dwelling in that chapter. So for me, it actually has provided also a pathway and beautiful reminders for me as I walk on my journey of my own spiritual development and my own ego popping up to take control again and again. So I just find her wisdom invaluable. And it's opened me, I think, because I was very much like her too, very independent, very capable, and so sort of pretty much, planning my own way here, and then suddenly all of that just went poof. So I learned the path of surrender, and still learning it.
You lead pilgrimages to sacred sites in Europe. Any trips planned for the near future?
In fact, I have. In fact, I'm leaving in a few days. I'm actually heading to lead a pilgrimage to Assisi, Italy. I've also written a book on Clare of Assisi, St. Francis of Assisi's spiritual companion. And then, true to my Celtic heritage, I'm leading a couple of pilgrimages in Ireland, and then I'm taking one to Avila, Spain, Teresa's home place, which for me, this is just, I just love it, because there's something that really happens on a very deep transformational level for people when they're physically, present at these places where great saints and mystics have lived, have worked, have walked, have died, and you can feel it there. You can feel their energy, their presence, and it's great honor for me to witness, the depth of experience that people have and that they take home with them, and my own self too, and the group itself also always has a beautiful dynamic in its own. So yeah, it's a great gift.
One last question, and we'll finish up. What gives you a feeling that despite all of the difficult times that we're living in, that we really can live together peacefully?
Well, I think basically, I recall a Tibetan Lama saying, one of the most beautiful gifts of the human being is tenderness. And that really struck me, and it was like, that is so beautiful. And yet, that is probably one of the rarest things that we actually witness in the human being, is tenderness. And so, I'm a great advocate for the gentle nature of our being coming forward and the tenderness coming forward, because I think we're all really starved for it. We all really desire it, and that is such a natural place of our being. I mean, you just look at any of us when we're confronted with a newborn baby. It's just a huge heart opening of tenderness, no matter how gruff you are. So I think we have, this a beautiful innate capacity, and Teresa actually says this too. She says, I've never seen anything so beautiful and with such an infinite capacity as the human soul. And it's like, that's a pretty tremendous statement, this infinite capacity and the absolute beauty of the human soul. And I think it's just really a matter of us being able to turn and to gaze upon that, to look upon that firstly within our own selves, and then within others. And I think that this concept of self-love, which is so just foreign to the Western mind and tradition, I think it has a great place to play in this.